Hospitality, food and beverage, it attracts, I'm going to say this, but people might not agree with it, but I've spent my time in hospitality, but it attracts misfits.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Brass Tacks Business Podcast. Today, I'm very, very, very excited to introduce Jennifer Demetrio. Hello, Jen. Thanks for being on.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So on today's episode, Jen is a passionate restaurateur with deep roots in hospitality. Originally from Staten Island, New York, she studied food service at Johnson & Wales University, launching a career that took her through the pastry kitchens of high-end hotels across the country for over a decade. In 2015, Jennifer and her husband Gary opened Café Kindred in Falls Church, creating a beloved neighborhood favorite. Last year, through the urging of Jasmine and Keith, she opened up and expanded by reopening the historic Leesburg Diner, giving the 150-year-old King Street landmark a fresh new life while honoring its classic charm. With a love for community and commitment to quality and exciting plans for future growth, Jennifer continues to build spaces where great food and genuine connections thrive. So, thanks so much for being on today, Jen. I'm so excited to have you. For all the listeners that don't know, Jasmine and I have been a Café Kindred favorite for years, and we have been begging Jen. Yeah, and we have been begging Jen to come to Leesburg, and so I'm so glad you finally came to Leesburg and revived the diner.
Here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. So, Jen, tell us a little bit of how'd you get into the food industry? What interested you in this realm kind of growing up? Did you always have a passion for food or hospitality?
I think I did, but didn't really know it. My family, especially my grandmother, was always cooking. We always came together for big meals every week. When my mom started working again after staying home with us, myself and my sister, when she started working again, one of the things that I kind of picked up as a chore was cooking family meal once or twice a week. So kind of started about maybe when I was 11, 12, something like that. And then just kind of enjoyed it. To be perfectly honest, I enjoyed the eating just as much as the making of the food. So also the memories specifically of just everybody coming together and, families are families. Sometimes it's, huge cluster of people and it's chaos and it's everything, but it's also creates great memories. And those are the things that I really, felt a passion for and really enjoyed the most. It's tricky when people ask me how I got into this as a career. If I'm going to be fully, completely honest, when I was in high school, school came really easy to me. Academics was really, really easy to me. It didn't challenge me at all. And I kind of created this life for myself where I just always took the easy road. I was 18 looking for colleges and things like that. Johnson & Wales was one of the easiest applications, dead honest. And I went there and I fell in love with the different nature than academics gave. It was a different life. You were in class, you were on your feet, you were doing things, you were taking action. They had classes Monday through Thursday, and they encouraged everyone to get jobs Friday, Saturday, Sunday, to work in hospitality and get real experience doing that kind of a thing. But to be really, really honest, I really went to that school. Well, I applied to that school because it was pretty simple. I guess weaknesses as a child was never taking that road of challenge. It was always taking the easy road. And I think as 16, 17, 18-year-olds, like a lot of us do. But then I went through 4 years of it, learned different aspects of hospitality, budgeting, things of that nature. But I really did enjoy not being in a classroom all the time. I enjoyed being in kitchens. I enjoyed working with other people. Creativity was something that I actually struggled with. So that was something that I kind of had to get out of my box a little bit in college, and it pushed me. And then, after that, I was really, really lucky in that I just got a job offer right out of school. I happened to, while I was in college, I broke my arm in a snowboarding accident and ended up being, unable to do a lot of classes that required, your hands. So I couldn't do that. So what I ended up doing was doubling up on my acting classes. So I was able to graduate early. What that did for me was give me access to jobs that were open a little bit earlier before a typical graduation time. So I was able to get a really great opportunity at the Ritz-Carlton in Las Vegas. And that was my first job out of college. And it was amazing. I mean, I fell in love with the company. I stayed at the company for years. I love the company still to this day. I have friends in the company. They taught me an immense amount. And especially now opening restaurants and leading restaurant, people that work in our restaurants, I reflect back onto what they taught me almost daily. So I think honestly, the Ritz-Carlton had a huge, huge impact on my trajectory after that first job.
I would love to ask you more about that. What do you feel like you learned at the Ritz-Carlton that you try to implement in your restaurants today? Obviously, it's a very well-known high-end, brand and hotel. What any specifics or any golden nuggets that you learned while you there for several years, or how long were you there?
Sure. So I stayed in Las Vegas for about 3 years, and then I transferred over to the Ritz-Carlton in Central Park in New York. I was there for a few years, and then it led me to work in the Peninsula in Beverly Hills, and then I worked at another hotel in New York. So it led me down a path of, I was with the Ritz-Carlton in total probably about 6 or 7 years, but it also gave me an opportunity to work at other high-end hotels. But the reason Ritz-Carlton really stuck with me, and to be honest, I don't think I really appreciated it in the moment, but later on I was able to use them and reflect on their values more than anything. And it's something that we use religiously now. I mean, as a company, we have our own core values, which I learned through the Ritz-Carlton. They have their own core values. Service was of the utmost. One of my biggest takeaways from the Ritz-Carlton is one of their mottos is, "We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." And the reason that was so important to me, and I use that with our managers or with our management team now, is because it reminds us that we're not servants, right? We're providing a service to people, and we are always want to be at our best game, right? We always want to have our best day. Of course, that's not reality. We all have better and worse days, but we always want to try our best to make sure that we are providing a service that is anticipatory, right? We want to try to anticipate guest needs before they even ask for it. We want to take notes of little cues from people. Are they walking around, or are they looking around? Are they looking for some help with something? Maybe they're not very forthcoming if they have a problem, but we want to solve those problems. So I would say from Ritz-Carlton, the biggest thing is just that service mentality. It's the service mentality, but it's not just us to the guest. It's us amongst each other, amongst the team. Another thing from the Ritz-Carlton is they call team members our internal guests. So we have our external guests, obviously, which are people that are staying at the hotel or utilizing our services or what have you, eating at the restaurants. But we have our internal guests as well, and those are just our coworkers, our team members, and we learn to have the utmost and same amount of respect for each other as we did and do for our external guests. So it's really the softer skills that the Ritz-Carlton really hones, and they hold you accountable for. The well-known Chick-fil-A, "my pleasure" kind of response, that comes from Ritz-Carlton, that stems from Ritz-Carlton. And, at times it was a little challenging because it sounds very unnatural, right? To say "my pleasure" every time. You just want to say "you're welcome" or "you got it" or whatever. But if you did reply that way, there were real conversations with your superiors about whether that was appropriate for the establishment that we worked in, and they really, really honed in on that. And they at times you kind of feel like they're pounding it into you, but it was with such good intentions. And like I said later, I maybe didn't appreciate it as much back then, but opening our restaurants, growing our restaurants, most importantly, growing our team, now those are things that I reflect back on all the time, every day.
I'm so glad you brought up the softer skills. That's something that I don't know if it's similar, but I'm always telling my staff, I'm like, it's the little things that matter, right? Is that kind of what Ritz-Carlton, softer skills, saying things like "my pleasure," even though it seems like a funny little, thing, I feel like those little things are really what make, the biggest impact when you train your staff on that. Do you
Yeah,
find the same?
absolutely. And I think for sure, I think, one of our core values for Café Kindred and Leesburg Diner is attention to details. And the reason we want to pay attention to the details. Now, look, do we succeed 100% every single time, every single day on all of our core values? No, we don't. We slip we're human, we make mistakes, right? We're learning. Everybody is, no matter what level you're on. But attention to details are so important because it naturally creates a better, bigger picture, right? It creates a more seamless experience for the guest. Just as a tiny little example, which seems silly, but if at the end of the day, if my task is to make sure that all the ketchup bottles on the tables are full and I kind of am lazy that day and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'll do that tomorrow. But then I have an early guest the next day and they sit down, their ketchup's empty and they've got to, they got to wait to eat because they got to find somebody to get the ketchup. It creates this lag in service for guests that we don't want to see. So does it happen? Yeah, of course it does, but it shouldn't as much as possible. And we want to make sure that all those little things create a more seamless experience for the guests.
Absolutely. Anything else from, I mean, you touched on core values a lot, which I absolutely love. Any other big takeaways after working at these high-end places like the Ritz-Carlton and in Beverly Hills that you currently kind of try to train your current staff on?
Yeah, I think approachability is another one of our core values. Now, that wasn't a core value for any of the companies that I work with specifically, but I think it embodies a lot of what they did try to get across, or what they did get across. They really wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable approaching everyone, whether it was, the general manager of the hotel or the guy that worked in laundry or the cafeteria attendant. Didn't matter. Everyone had an open door policy and we try to live by that as well. So again, it's not just, these values aren't just guest to team member and team member to guest. It's amongst the team as well. It's really important for new folks to be able to approach, experienced members of the team and be able to ask for help when they need it. Same goes in the other direction. If I'm a new person that just joined the team, if I see somebody that maybe isn't doing something the way that I was trained, I should feel comfortable saying, hey, I was trained on it this way. Is this the right way we're supposed to do it? Or, anything like that. We kind of try to leave the ego at the door. And that's one of the biggest things that they taught me as well. Leave the ego at the door. We're all here for the same mission. We have the same purpose, and the purpose is to serve the guest. So we want to make sure that we work as a team, and the only way that we can work as a team is if we're comfortable approaching one another. So I think approachability, like I said, it wasn't exactly a core value at these companies, but it is for us, and that's where it comes from.
Absolutely. I like that you said you took the easy road in school and you applied to the application because it was easy. But after working at the Ritz-Carlton, all these high-end hotels, it seems like you definitely have not taken the easy road. And with you and Gary now reviving this 100, what led you to that decision or made you say, oh yeah, this is what we want to do. This is, because it's one thing opening another restaurant. It's a totally different, animal to not only open another restaurant, but just completely redo it, and revive an older diner like that. So what did you and Gary have a conversation like, hey, this is definitely what we want to do, or what kind of led to that decision?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely not the easy road.
Yeah.
I think life always teaches us that lesson, that when we constantly take the easy road, eventually we're going to get forced onto that road of challenges, because life isn't meant to be easy. If it's easy all the time, we don't learn anything. We don't grow. We don't grow in our appreciation of certain things in life. So I think it was going to force me onto that road at some point. But even before that, opening our own restaurant was the biggest challenge of our lives. There were so many things that went wrong or unexpectedly. It took us years to become profitable. It took us years to understand our way, understand our path. But like you said, opening your own restaurant versus trying to revive someone else's previous dream is wildly different. The challenge in trying to re-enliven another restaurant is that, which is something that we didn't think of prior, was that the place that exists is already a lot of people's favorite place. And everybody has different opinions on places. Obviously, I could love a place and you can hate it and vice versa. It's just what we like. It's preference. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and might still be a challenge to this day and might always live on, I don't know, but you aren't comparing yourself to a past, but outside folks are going to continue to compare you to a previous love that they had. So, there's that challenge. Will you ever win them over? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but the reality is you can't be everything for everybody, and you have to find your people and you have to find your community. And one of the biggest parts of that is staying true to your core values. And if you're constantly chasing the next trend or the next thing that's hot or whatever that may be, you're not being guided by a certain set of principles. And I think the more every decision we make with our core values in mind. And if we feel like we're straying from those, we don't do that. If we feel like it aligns with who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, that's the road we go down. So yeah, I mean, there's a wild amount of challenges. We've had the diner now for a year and a half, almost going on 2 years. I mean, there were a few months of some facelift had to go on internally, within the walls, physically. So I think we took it over in July. I'll never forget. It was July 11th because it was Free Slurpee Day, and we opened in October. So there were a few months, pardon me, that we were closed for renovation. But it's been over a year that we're operating, and we're trying different things, and we're listening to people as much as we can. One of the things that we learned early on in our first restaurant was, every time somebody made a suggestion, we did that. So we were constantly changing, but not necessarily in a good way. We were changing on how other folks perceive that we should be doing something. And you have to weigh those suggestions, because more often than not, they're with good intention. People want you to do well. People want you to be a part of the community. But like I said earlier, people have different preferences. So if you listen to every single person, you're constantly changing. If we learned soon after opening our first restaurant that we have to kind of take everything in, take in all the good, all the bad, and then, after a few months, assess all of that feedback, make changes where we think we need to change them, and move on. You can't stay the same always and just hope that it works out. You have to be continuously changing. You have to be continuously looking for ways to be better. And like I said before, we're not perfect. We make mistakes all the time, just like everywhere, but we want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction all the time. I'll be frank, there was a period not a few months back, I can't remember when it was actually, that we were just getting slaughtered on social media. And it was just tough to read. It's easy for people to forget that there are real human beings behind businesses, especially small businesses, that really take these things to heart. And you can argue how much you should and shouldn't take in, but you do. You're a person and you take it in. And it was really hard to digest and hard to read, but, we had to kind of pick out of all those things that were being said, what has value in it and what should we take as not necessarily positive feedback, but constructive criticism, and move in a different direction. We've done that, and we've seen some good, progress from that. Yeah. I mean, I would say that's probably the biggest challenge. You're constantly having to try to live up to people's idea of what the past was. Whether that idea is honest and true, we don't know. But all we can do is do our best every day and try to get better.
What were some of the non-negotiables, when redoing the diner and refreshing the space? Obviously, you still wanted to honor the history of the diner, but you also wanted to make it new. So with all the feedback you were getting, whether it was social media or, just from your staff or former guests at the diner, what were some of the non-negotiables that you guys felt like, had to stick to with your core values and things like that when you were refreshing the space?
Sure. That's a really good question. I will say I think Gary did pretty much all of the refresh and the renovations. He has a really good ability to see things in his brain before he does it, what it might look like. I have none of that. So he kind of, took the reins on that. But basically our vision was, a fresh, bright, 1950s style diner. Some of the non-negotiables were, gosh, I mean, I don't know that we had any. We introduced a full espresso bar menu to the space that didn't have it before. So we just tried to look for ways that could elevate the experience a little bit more. We did a lot of manipulating the space to make it work better for the team. So especially for the kitchen, setting in new equipment, kind of organizing where things are. It sounds small, but it takes a long time to make sure that they can work in a space that's efficient, that's clean, that works well for them. So that was, a big part of it. A big part of it was just kind of ripping everything apart to give it kind of get to know it, um, know the space, see the history for ourselves, know what was where. You have to get a lay of the land. So that was a really big part of it. It's a dirty job, somebody's got to do it. But yeah, I think, like I said, Gary did a lot of the renovation. There were no non-negotiables. If there was something that somebody mentioned to us or gave us some feedback on, it was considered. I can't think of a single thing that we were hard, dead set no on. We've tried 100 different things. There is, and this is something we've been talking about a lot. You asked if Gary and I sat and had a conversation about, yeah, we had 100 of them. And, we talked about every little thing, before the milkshakes were made out front by the servers. We moved it to the kitchen so it wasn't disruptive to the guests. Some people like it, some people hate it. Like I said, you can't please everybody, but we want to make sure that we tried different things to make it work most efficiently for our team. That was always going to be our biggest goal. As far as what the space would look like, fresh, clean, bright. That's what we were going for. Pop art on the walls of people that were around in the 50s and 60s, the Elvis in the side room, Ray Charles up front. There's a lot of that kind of artwork that just kind of helps make it pop. But like I said, Gary did 99.9% of that stuff. So he's definitely the more creative type. So he did it all. I got to give him credit.
I agree. Gary definitely did a phenomenal job. For those of you who are listening, if you haven't been to the new renovated Leesburg Diner, you definitely have to go check it out. Jen, with all the changes that you did, all the work that Gary did, renovating the space, figuring it out, I love that you brought up that point about like knowing the lay of the land, because I think what a lot of people don't realize is whether you buy a business or you take over an existing business, there are so many unknowns until you get in there and you actually experience it yourself. I know Jasmine and I have, with the Pure Bar, studios, we've found that out, firsthand. But even with all the unknowns, Jen, and getting a lay of the land and making the, modifications that you and Gary had to do, what do you feel like has been the most rewarding moment now that you've been in business a year and a half? Everything is much more established now. What do you feel like, whether it's feedback from a guest or from the staff, what has been the most rewarding thing now that you guys have been open a year and a half?
That's a really good question as well. I don't think it's in a particular moment. I think it lives in seeing the people that work for us grow. That's always going to be the most rewarding part for me. Hospitality, food and beverage, it attracts, I'm going to say this, but people might not agree with it, but I've spent my time in hospitality, but it attracts misfits. We're just, we're a group of misfits that find a home in a chaotic environment, and for some reason we thrive and love it. But a lot of those folks haven't had an opportunity to realize their own potential. A lot of these folks haven't been given a chance to challenge themselves or grow in their own professional ways. And I think one of the misconceptions is that you can't really make a living from restaurants. It's not a real job. And I love seeing people either rise up through our leadership program or, even if they're hired in as a leadership, and just helping them grow into next level and talking about their dreams and their goals and their challenges and working with them to make sure that we're growing in those ways. Like I said earlier, everybody's growing, everybody's learning every single day, myself included, 100%. So I think it's not necessarily in one particular moment, but it's in all the little times where somebody will say something to me that they wouldn't have said a year ago, right? They may not have taken accountability for their own actions when they did something wrong. Maybe it was a blame game or something like that. And now they're coming to me and saying, look, I messed this up. I need help on how to fix it. Those are the moments where, yeah, it sounds like a terrible moment where somebody made a mistake or did something wrong, or maybe, screwed up a relationship with a regular, those things happen. And it sounds like a terrible moment, but it's really a moment of opportunity. And it's a moment of opportunity, not just for us, but for these team members. And, you get to a point where you work with people for, even if it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be, but you become so connected so quickly because your main focus is their growth. Your main focus is them realizing some of their own goals. And they could be small goals, they could be huge lifetime goals, doesn't matter. We try to break them down into bite-sized moments, but it really lives in the recognition of seeing people grow and get more and do more and realize that they can do more than they were ever allowed to do before.
So glad you said that. I enjoyed the comment you made. It's a group of misfits that thrive in a chaotic environment, which we could definitely go on a tangent on. But I feel like I learned all of my customer service skills working in restaurants growing up. Some of the places I worked were definitely more just kind of middle of the road. And then I did feel blessed enough to have some more higher end restaurants that I was able to work in. And to this day, I am constantly telling my staff the same things you just mentioned, like anticipating people's needs. There is no way I would have learned that had I not worked in restaurants for years in undergrad and graduate school. So I feel like, the different places I worked, I definitely over the years took more pride in what I, kind of did, whether I was just waiting tables or bartending or whatever it did. But now looking back on it as an adult, as a mature adult, I definitely feel like customer service in this day and age separates you from a lot of other small businesses. And I think it's the main crucial factor. The attention to detail, like you said, the anticipating people's needs, like that is so huge and that can separate yourself from other, small businesses. What do you feel, are some of the key ingredients? And, I'm happy to, if you want to mention, Café Kindred, since you started that years ago, what are some of the key ingredients maybe that you had established at Café Kindred that you're trying to transfer to Leesburg Diner that you feel like has been able to keep you and Gary successful over the past, decade?
Sure. So, I think, first of all, what you said is right. I think you cannot learn learn guest service in other places, right? You can learn guest service in retail and things of that nature, but I would struggle to find another industry where you're really creating a connection. Restaurants are places where people go to for their birthdays. They go for anniversaries. They go to celebrate graduations. They go every week with their kids. These are places that in 20 years, when you look back on memories, these places are going to be part of those memories. And there is no equivalent to that, in my opinion. Where you spend your time is very, very important. Obviously, more important is who you're with, but where you are is creating the environment for that. So if they're making you feel comfortable in a space and they're creating an environment that propels community and conversation, that is top notch for us. That's the most important. Now, some of the things that we've done in Café Kindred that we are trying to bring to the diner is mostly our ideals of service. Like I said earlier, is just like anticipating guest needs, working together side by side. I'm sure working in restaurants, you've experienced this as well, where it's like, there's one guy on staff that just doesn't do his fair share of work. Everybody else is kind of carrying him. We don't really allow that. We stay very engaged with our team members. We have one-on-ones every month. I never, to be honest, even at high-end places, I never received one-on-ones or reviews or even open conversations with my manager about what I could improve upon. Sure, we did 6-month reviews or year reviews or things of that nature. Or maybe you applied for a promotion and then they would talk to you about it. But there wasn't an open dialogue between our managers and our line staff about what our goals are, what our challenges are, where we're falling short, what we need to work on, what we're doing really well on. Those things I didn't have experience with. We started doing that in Café Kindred it was right after COVID, so probably like not until about 2020, 2021. And if you think about it, we were open 5 years before that. That's a significant amount of time. And now we're trying to really change how our relationships are among our team members, but also with us and our team members, with our leaders and their team members. So we really had to open that up. So we started doing monthly one-on-ones in addition to reviews that we weren't even doing that before either. I'd be hard pressed to find a restaurant that does reviews consistently, to be honest with you. We do drop the ball a lot on things that corporate companies tend to do very well. But that was one thing that and it's a big challenge. A lot of times you don't get the results that you're hoping for, but insisting on those weekly conversations, monthly conversations, setting that path of where we want to be, having really difficult conversations with people that are working really, really hard and have really great intentions, but just aren't cutting it. Having those conversations about where they need to be, but also keeping an ear open about what am I not giving to them? What am I falling short on? Where am I not providing them the support that they need? We just had a meeting on Sunday at Leesburg about, we've gone through kind of an overhaul in the kitchen staff. So it's a challenging time, when you're trying to train a bunch of people, you've got new leadership. It's challenge, but having those constant conversations helps. But we had that conversation on this past weekend about how we're gonna get forward. And I said to them, every time we have a success, it's the success of my team, and every time something goes wrong, that's a failure on my part. It's my job to take the blame. It's my job to provide what they need to do their job, and if I'm not there supporting them and giving them feedback along the way, that's a failure on my part. So I would say the biggest thing that we started for ourselves in Café Kindred about 2020, probably into 2020, reconnecting with our team members, really diving deep into that relationship, and letting them know, like, hey, we're here for you. We're also huge control freaks. So we started to allow them to do their jobs, right? Everybody hates that, where you're hired to do a job and then there's somebody there that's like constantly asking you, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? I didn't notice this. Either trust them to do the job and provide the support, or do it yourself. You can't have it both ways. So that was a big lesson that for myself was, I'm still learning, to be honest with you. But bringing that mentality and that structure of open communication with our team, among our team, but with myself and Gary, as well as the managers, has been hugely beneficial. When we had this changeover in kitchen staff, my general manager, of course, true to form, Gary and I jumped in and started doing all the things that we should have allowed other people to do. Like I said earlier, we make mistakes. About a week into that, our general manager turned to me and said, you're making me feel really useless. I said, why? And she said, you're taking all of the things and doing them, and now I feel like I'm not helping, I'm not important, I'm not a vital part of this solution. And I was just she was 100% right. There was not a single thing that she said that was wrong. She was 100% right in that moment. Of course, I could have been like, oh, no, you're just not doing, you're not taking initiative. But in the moment, it's more of a, yeah, you know what? You're 100% right. How can I better support you in being a part of this solution? And I was just, two parts of that. One part was, yeah, she's right. Right. She's 100% right. The other portion of that was, what a blessing is to have a relationship with somebody that is technically beneath you, right? She reports to me, if you want to break it down in a kind of hierarchy. But I thought it reflected so well on the rapport that we've developed, and the fact that she could come to me and tell me her honest feedback. I know for myself, I've been in a position many, many times where I was just far too nervous to even say anything. And I thought, wow, even more so than the fact that she was right, the fact that she was comfortable approaching me and telling me my weakness in that moment, I was so grateful for, because I was like, okay, yes, this is a person that is engaged in her work, takes pride in her job, and wants to be a part of the solution, and I'm stifling that. So you really, we've really had to take that mentality that we had in Kindred, and that building rapport, and take that to the diner. And I think that's our number one asset, is that constant communication, is that constant desire for us to get people to grow and be engaged in the work that they're doing and take pride in it.
Well,
Approachability.
Congratulations to you, Jen, because just the fact that your staff had that comfortability to come to you and give you that, honest feedback, which I 100% agree with you. When our big core value is accountability here, and I not only want to keep my team accountable, but I want my team to keep me accountable. So when you just said that definitely hit a nerve with me, because I absolutely love it when they keep me accountable. And I think it's it's a testament to you as a leader, Jen, now of these two businesses, these two restaurants, that your staff can come to give you feedback, because it is hard when you're when you're a team member and you're going to an authority figure and giving them feedback, you gotta, understand that's very hard for them. But it also shows that you as
Course.
a leader have, given them that comfortability or that, say, like you mentioned, relationship. You've got that, rapport with them that they, because I absolutely love it when my staff, and I'm constantly like, hey guys, I'm okay. Like, give me feedback because I love it when you do,
Right.
because I feel like as leaders, sometimes our teams are afraid to, tell us, when we're wrong or, and a lot of times, just like you said, they're absolutely right. What do you feel like, now that you have expanded your team, you have expanded these restaurants, what qualities have you learned? Giving up control is the hardest thing for me as well. But what other qualities do you feel like now that you've got the two restaurants, you're going back and forth between, the different teams. What do you feel like? What leadership qualities do you feel that you have now embraced with both restaurants?
For myself, to be honest, I never ever saw myself as a leader at all. Over the years, over the past, say, 5 to 7 years, about 5 years ago, we actually brought in a coaching company because we were at a point where, and Gary and I talk about this all the time. We were at a breaking point, not financially, which is crazy. A lot of businesses go under because, they can't pay the bills, right? That wasn't our challenge. Our challenge was how do we become leaders? And we'd brought in this coaching company, and they taught me so much. And one of the things was holding everybody else accountable. I will say, like you said, I still struggle with control a lot, and I talk about that, with my team a lot. The core of that is a lack of trust, and it's not their fault. It takes me a long time to trust someone. That's just something that I developed in my lifetime somewhere that lives inside me. I don't know why, but it does. And they know that about me. They know that it takes me a long time to trust someone. So, they on one hand very much understand the fact that I'm a control freak, and we do joke about it. But on the other hand, they do hold me accountable. And our word of the year for 2025 is accountability for the leadership team, and is the pinnacle of ensuring that our systems are working, that our systems are being used, they're in place, they're proper. Because, if I create systems to make sure that our restaurant runs smoothly and half the people are using them, half the people aren't, therein lies the inconsistency of our service. So where does our leadership have to lean? Our leadership has to lean on holding people accountable to these systems. And it's an everyday task. It's an absolute everyday task. But I would say the biggest thing, like I said, I'm still struggling with that control issue. I don't know a lot of people that have started their own businesses and don't struggle with that, because at the end of the day, this is your livelihood, and it's your reputation. Your reputation of the business is directly correlated with your own personal one. And we want to we want people to think positive things when they think of us, right? So that control, it's false, right? We don't have control. The reality is we don't have it. We think we have control over it. We don't. But the control issues are really my main focus right now. That will be a struggle for me for a long time, I'm sure, but I am working on it. I think that's the biggest thing that I need to work on. And the one thing that I hold my leadership team to is accountability, especially, like I said, this year, your word of the year, 2025, accountability. We can't go any further without that a certain level of accountability. We can talk about ideas and what we want to do next year and all these things, but if we're not safe on our building blocks, if we're not sturdy in the very basic things, then we can't go anywhere. We need a strong foundation. And yeah, a year and a half sounds like a long time. You know, maybe we're slow learners. I don't know. But, we're still finding our footing. We're still creating that space where people are accountable. They trust us to lead them in the right direction. So I think it really just it takes time. But yeah, I think the most important thing for me right now that I struggle with is building that trust with people, not taking it personally when they potentially fall short, because we all do, and definitely letting go a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Tell me more about the coaching that you got, Jen. I know you said the Café Kindred, you had been in business for what, 4 or 5 years. I also think a lot of people don't know, maybe you can expand on it too. Like restaurants are extremely difficult to become profitable. Why is that, and how did the coaching that you guys program you guys went through, how did that help make you guys more profitable? Why is it so hard for restaurants to become profitable?
I think we're in the business of pleasing people, and that's both great and it could also provide a challenge. There's so many aspects to it. I think one, if you're not paying attention to the numbers aren't going to manage themselves. Number one, you have to know your numbers. A lot of places don't put the focus on that. They don't talk about P&Ls. They don't talk about labor costs and food costs and your fixed costs, like your rent and your insurance and things of that nature. They're not talked about in restaurants a lot. What do we talk about? We talk about the menu. We talk about guest service. We talk about upselling and downselling. We talk about training, and even that we're pretty bad on, but as a whole. But the conversation about managing costs tends to be very limited to either ownership or the very, very, very top echelon of people that are working there managing the business. What we've done is, with the help of this coaching program, was make the costs of business known to everyone on the team. Everybody on our team knows what our labor cost goals are. Everybody on the team knows what our food cost goals are. We also work in an industry where prices change day to day. Everybody saw it with the eggs, right? Now, restaurants saw it with eggs before the general public did. We went from paying $55 for 15 dozen eggs to $120 for 15 dozen eggs. That's a huge difference. And when you talk about breakfast restaurants that we happen to find ourselves in, we use a lot of eggs, and people went about that in different ways, but there's fluctuations on costs constantly, so that's very difficult to manage. So we're always price shopping. We have a select number of vendors, and we're constantly asking, hey, can you do better price on this? Can you do a better price on this? We look at things that are in season to try to not only is the flavor better, but the prices are better. There's an abundance of them. So there's so many aspects to it, but the biggest thing, in my opinion, and like I said, one of the things that we learned from this coaching company was not to hide the numbers from your team. If they know what the costs are, they're going to get a better understanding as to why you're, maybe sending this person home early, or, telling them, no, stop ordering all this stuff. We don't need it. Why, if you just are constantly sending people home early on slow days, they're just mad that their paychecks are going to get smaller. They don't have any other real concept. They think you're making big bucks and they're, just getting the short end of the stick. But the truth of the matter is, the more that they know, the more they comprehend, the more they see that it costs a lot of money to run a business. We recently, over the past few months, I've actually shared, which we didn't do this earlier, and I don't know why we didn't, but I shared our fixed costs with our managers for both locations. And when I did that, they were just shocked. They had no concept as to, maybe they had an idea as to what the rent was, but they had no idea about the utilities that go into it, the insurance that is in there, the pest control that you get every month to prevent problems, all these little things that, they add up. And now when you share that information with them, now they understand. Now they understand where, a little bit more about where the money goes, giving them goals, right? We have goal percentages on food costs and labor costs. If you're a competitive person, you want to meet those goals. You don't want to fail every single week. You want to, if our food cost goal is 27% and we're always falling at 29, they're going to do everything that they can to get that extra percent next week, and an extra percent the week after. So you create that desire to work within their means, because they also know, like, hey, if I don't manage these costs, I might be out of a job, right? If we don't manage these costs on a grand scale over time, the restaurant might shut down. 15 people are out of work. I don't want that. That's my nightmare, right? So they take that knowledge and apply it to their everyday jobs. Every time they order, every time they make a schedule, that's what lives in the back of their mind when they're doing those tasks. They know what's at stake. They know, and they take it seriously. Honestly, if it's somebody that's on leadership that doesn't understand that or doesn't take that seriously, they don't work with us. It's just one of those things that, we say it all the time, the math has to math, right? We can't live in a world and continue to operate in a place that doesn't work on profitability. Restaurants are always so afraid to talk about profitability, but every other sector runs on profitability, right? And it's for good reason. Profitability gives you an opportunity to do better. It gives you longevity. It gives you an opportunity to offer things to your team that you couldn't offer. We offer benefits to our team in Falls Church. We don't do it in Leesburg yet, but we'll get there. These are things that aren't always offered in other restaurants, and we're so hard on the numbers because we want to make sure that we're giving our team the best that we can. We're not a big corporation, we're very small. So big corporations have the benefit, right? They get better pricing on food, they get preference on deliveries, they get if they want to offer health insurance, they get it a lot cheaper than I get it. So there's all these things that work in there, but we have to do our best within our scope of who we are to offer our team the best that we can. But there, it starts with the knowledge that they have to understand the business aspect of it. It has to make sense for them. They have to know that, your goal number of hours for this schedule is 420. If you're at 500, it's not going to work. So they know that, they have that knowledge, and we talk about it every week. Every week I send them, the previous week's numbers. They understand where we are. I make suggestions where we could do better, or just give accolades when it's amazing. So it all starts with the knowledge that they have to understand. Kind of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, for them.
I'm so glad you brought that up because this is exactly why I started this podcast, is to let listeners understand how difficult it is to run a small business. I don't think the layperson realizes all the different factors that go into running a small business. And what you just said is so important for people to know that I think maybe, if you don't run a small business, you may think, oh, they just want to make profit to put the profit into their pocket. But really, a lot of us business owners, when we become profitable, we're giving it back to our team, just like you said. We're giving them benefits. We're being able to do nice things for them or have XYZ perks for our team. So it's always, or we, I know we obviously give back to the community as well. Amongst all of the success you've had, Jen, with both restaurants, what's one moment where you've finally been able to step back and just been reminded, like, this is why I do what I do? Has there been a moment in time where you finally have realized, like, this is why I decided to go into the restaurant business? This is, because it can be very stressful. It can be, a little chaotic at times. Yeah. Is there one point in time where you're like, yes, this is why I do what I do?
I think it's the same as before. It's the little moments. Getting to know people as regulars, learning their, getting to know their family, seeing the kids grow up, seeing people get married, you become a part of people's lives in a way that's kind of on the outskirts, but they're so excited to talk to you about what's going on in their life. And that is such a privilege for us to just kind of sneak into somebody's life a little bit at a time. You start off as a place where, oh, I've never been to this place for coffee, I'll try it, right? And then, you like it, so you go back. And then, we see you enough times, we start to recognize you. And then we start to talk about, oh, do you live around here? What are you doing? We start to know their story. And I can't even count the number of relationships that have formed for us, but not only just myself, for my team as well, from having a place that is community driven. And like I said, I don't think it's one big aha moment. I think it's the little times that people share their wins with you and they trust you, and the small wins for your team. I think those are huge. I think it's in the daily lives of people. Like I said, when they trust you to talk to you about, oh my gosh, we're pregnant again, or we're moving, we're so bummed that we're not gonna be able to see you guys, and we're moving to this place that doesn't have any coffee shops or anything like that. We're gonna miss this, we're gonna miss that. It's kind of sad to lose people over some years, but it's such a nice small thing that people say that means a whole lot to us. Like I said, you kind of creep into these people's lives little by little. Before you know it, they can't live without you. And we feel the same way for them. It's like, oh man, when people move away, it's like you get sad. When you stop seeing with someone, or they, go to college or something like that, you get a little sad. You start to miss folks because they've become a part of your life just like you have become a part of theirs. And I just hope for ourselves that we never lose the gratitude for that. I think it's such an important aspect of it. Does everybody that walks in the door, are they my best friend? No, I don't know everyone, but there are people that I've become very, very close with. And guess what? The people that I don't know, our manager Amber knows. The people that Amber doesn't know, Lily knows, or Clayton knows, or Julie knows. It's not just about me and the relationships that I build. It's about everyone and the relationships that they all build. And just knowing that it's a place that people like to come to. What an honor it is when people have choices and they choose us to spend their time, to spend their money. We don't take that for granted. I think it's so important to remember that. Actually, one of our other core values is an appreciative spirit, and we have to remember that people have options. They don't have to spend their time with us, they don't have to spend their money with us, but they choose to. And when they do, we want to be really appreciative of that. And I think it goes both ways. So I think, in every day therein lies these little moments where people remind us that there's a reason we do what we do. And it's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it.
When running these restaurants becomes overwhelming, Jen, or it's obviously no small feat to have two restaurants, what are some things you do to try to recharge or become inspired? What do you like just to get yourself out of the hustle and bustle of a restaurant?
Yeah, I like to read a lot. I do a lot of reading, not only, novels and things like that, but I really enjoy reading any leadership books or business books, things that I can do to further my path. I really enjoy things like that. It takes me out of all the chaos. And I actually really love doing crossword puzzles. I know that sounds like an old person thing to do. I am an old person, but it's one of the things that, for someone and a lot of people are like this, their brains never stop, especially in, I think, business owners, our brains are on all the time. Even I think our managers might not understand, when we're not in the building, we're thinking about our business. We're thinking about how it can be better. We're thinking about how to solve problems. So it always lives in our mind. So to turn that off is very, very hard. But it's funny because crossword puzzles has come back into my life recently. And it's just one task that I can do for maybe half an hour or an hour that really focuses my mind. And my brain is so focused on that I literally can't think of other things that are going on in work. I've become pretty diligent as far as exercising or working out in the morning. I wish I could say that means that that's a time that I turn my brain off. Don't all the time. I do my best, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, those are the things that I try my best on. Mondays are supposed to be Gary and I's day off together. It hasn't happened in a little while, but we try to be really protective of our time together. When you work with your spouse, the challenges are endless and you love this person dearly. And I know I can say that, I can speak for him and myself. You love this person dearly and they're your biggest support. But sometimes you just spend too much time with that person and, you need a break. But it doesn't mean that you need a break from the person. You need a break from the environment that you always find yourselves in, So we try to be very protective of our day off once a week together where honestly, we go on walks and try to do a lot of things that are like outdoors, quiet, and just very far away from the workspace. So it's a challenge to get your brain away from it, but yeah, we do it. We try to, it had been about 10 years between us being able to go on vacation. So we started taking vacations again about, I don't remember when our first vacation was, but it was a couple years ago. And since then, we've been pretty good about scheduling time away for ourselves, which had really, really fallen to the back burner for a long time. So that's back up there. So, we try to schedule it in and we try to make sure that we take time for ourselves.
What's next to come? I know you've got a lot on your plate, Jen, but what are some things, now that how long, Café Kindred, Leesburg Diners now, it's been a year and a half. Café Kindred, it's been much, much longer. Are there any new implementations you're trying to introduce or possibly a third restaurant? What do you feel like is the next step?
Yeah, that's tough. I think I don't think we're alone in this. I think as entrepreneurs, you're also always looking for another thing, or it kind of lives inside you and you're like, okay, what is that thing that's next for us? What's calling us? We just celebrated 10 years for Café Kindred And we were able to re-sign a lease in the location that we're in, which was a huge win. It takes a big weight off the shoulders. So we're happy to say that we're solidified in there for another 5 years or so, which gives us a little bit of a breath. Like you said, the Leesburg location is about a year and a half in. At this time, we really just want to make sure that Leesburg is running consistently well. We don't feel that it's on a firm footing right now. If to be honest, I think it takes time. I think it takes about 2 to 3 years before maybe smarter people can do it faster. For whatever reason, this is the time period that we find works for us. But hopefully within the next 6 months to a year, we'll be on much sturdier ground with Leesburg. We'll feel a little bit more confident. We're always tossing around ideas and practicing things. We don't know exactly what's next. We suspect we won't be keeping just the two. We suspect we'll grow in the future. The specific route that might take, not sure yet. We love the Northern Virginia area, so I don't think we'll be going very far. But yeah, I think it'll take some time before we can fully formulate exactly what our next move is. You'll be the first to know.
I definitely better be the first to know. Thank you for including me in that. Awesome. All right,
Of
Jen, we'll
course.
let everybody know where they can find you, where the two restaurants are, whether it's social media or the actual locations where if people are looking for, and I guess I should have asked this earlier, can you give us a little bit of background about, Café Kindred? We didn't touch on that as much, but like
Sure.
just kind of if people are in the Falls Church area and they're looking for a specific type of dining experience, what can they expect with Cafe Kindred and Leesburg Diner?
Sure. So Café Kindred is located in Falls Church. It's just a couple blocks away from the main strip on Broad Street, kind of toward the State Theater, 66 over there. We're located in a mixed-use building. It is very approachable, kind of British pop 70s decor, fun music, brunch style food, really good coffee. We use Vigilante Coffee, who trained us on coffee over 10 years ago. Very, very high quality, very well executed. So really for us, our dream there was to create a very comfortable space where people could connect and enjoy both really great food and great coffee. So we wanted to bring those two worlds together. I think we've done so thus far. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and what else are we on? A TikTok, of course, at Cafe Kindred. And then Leesburg Diner is a little bit different. It's a full service restaurant, like I said before, 50s style, kind of throwback, bright, clean. Again, fun kind of doo-wop music in the background. Classic American food. Like I said, we have introduced the espresso bar menu. So again, you can get really well executed lattes, cappuccinos, things of that nature, but also getting, a full American breakfast or lunch or anything like that. We're very much breakfast and lunch focused there, although we do serve dinner Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings. So you can find us at on King Street, right in the middle of historic downtown Leesburg. Beautiful, beautiful little town. I don't know, if you haven't been there, please visit. Even if you don't visit the diner, please visit the town. It's charming. It's beautiful. It's full of history, and we absolutely love it. And you can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Leesburg Diner by CK. So yeah, that's where you can find us. And yeah, we hope to see you guys. There's free parking abounds everywhere for both locations, so not to worry about that either. I know people worry about where to park their cars everywhere. So
Wonderful, Jen. Well, thank you so much for being on, and thank you for coming to Leesburg. Jasmine and I, for those of you that don't know, we are frequenters at at Leesburg Diner, excuse me. So if you haven't been by yet, check it out. The refresh and the renovation that Gary did was absolutely amazing. The food menu, it has also changed as well, so it's going to be a little bit different if you have been a previous guest of the original Leesburg Diner. So I recommend everyone going to check it out. And thank you so much for being on, Jen. We really appreciate it.
thanks, Keith. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Talk to you soon.
Bye.